Mr. President, this has been an unusual election year, to say the least. And Gallup regularly polls Americans with an open-ended question about the issues that matter most to them, and the environment consistently polls low on that list, around 2%. As you know, climate change is a long-term problem that requires long-term solutions. How can we all do a better job of engaging the public, especially those who are skeptical, in a meaningful and productive debate about the urgency of these issues, and inspire them to be a part of the solution now?
Well, climate change is almost perversely designed to be really hard to solve politically, because it is a problem that creeps up on you. There's no single hurricane or tornado or drought or forest fire that you can directly attribute to climate change. What you know is that as the planet gets warmer, the likelihood of what used to be, say, a 100-year flood, it's supposed to happen only every 100 years, suddenly starts happening every 5 years or every 2 years. And so the odds just increase of extreme weather patterns, but people, they don't see it as directly correlated. And the political system in every country is not well designed to do something tough now to solve a problem that people are really going to feel the impacts of in the future. The natural inclination of political systems is to push that stuff off as long as possible. So if we are going to solve this problem, then we're going to need some remarkable innovation. I mean, Katherine's exactly right that solar and wind is becoming a job generator and an economic development engine, but what's also true is we're going to need some real innovation in things like, for example, battery storage. How do we keep wind and solar stored without too much leakage so that when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, we still have regular energy power? And that's going to require mobilization. It is going to require us all doing a better job of educating ourselves, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, and ultimately expressing that in the polls. And in order to do that, I think it is important for those of us who care deeply about this, and Katherine is a wonderful example of the right way to do it, to not be dismissive of people's concerns when it comes to what will this mean for me and my family, all right? So if you're a working class family and dad has to drive 50 miles to get to his job, and he can't afford to buy a Tesla or a Prius, and the most important thing to him economically to make sure he can pay the bills at the end of the month is the price of gas. And when gas prices are low, that means an extra $100 in his pocket or $200 in his pocket, and that may make the difference about whether or not he can buy enough food for his kids. If you just start lecturing him about climate change and what's going to happen to the planet 50 years from now, it's just not going to register. So part of what we have to do, I think, is to engage, talk about the science, talk about the concrete effects of climate change. We have to make it visual and we have to make it vivid in ways that people can understand. But then we also have to recognize that this transition is not going to happen overnight, and you're not starting from scratch. People are locked into existing ways of doing business. Look, part of the reason we have such a big carbon footprint is our entire society is built around interstate highway systems and cars. And we can't overnight suddenly just start having everybody taking high-speed trains because we don't have any high-speed trains to take. And we have to build them. And we should start building them, but in the meantime, people have to get to work. And what I always tell my staff, and what I told our negotiators during the Paris Agreement, is better is good. Better is not always enough. Better is not always ideal. And in the case of climate change, better is not going to save the planet. But if we get enough better, each year we're doing something that's making more progress, moving us forward, increasing clean energy, then that's ultimately how we end up solving this problem. And that's when we can start creating political coalitions that will listen to us, because we're actually recognizing that, you know, some people have some real concerns about what this transition is going to do to them, to their pocketbook, and we've got to make sure that they feel like they're being heard in this whole process.
I couldn't agree more, first of all. And second of all, I think that this really underscores one of the biggest lessons that I, as a scientist, have learned. So often we feel like facts and information are what's going to make people care. And so many times I have someone coming to me and say, Katherine, if you could just talk to my mother, if you could just talk to my brother-in-law, if you could just talk to our city council person and give them the facts. It's real, it's us, it's bad, we have to fix it. That'll change their minds. The biggest thing I've learned is that facts are not enough. In fact, the more literate we are about science, the more polarized we are about climate change. The most important thing to do is not to pile up scientific reports until they reach a tottering pile of about 8 feet, or they'll tip over and crush somebody. The most important thing to do is to connect this issue to what's already in our hearts. Because one of the most insidious myths I feel like we've bought into is that I have to be a certain type of person to care about climate change. And if I am not that person, then I don't care about it because I care about these other things. But the reality is that if we're a human living on this planet, which most of us are, yep, as long as we haven't signed up for the trip to Mars. I don't want to know if anybody has. I think you're crazy.
I did, but I can't.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry. I take that back.
No, he is. I think he'll acknowledge he's crazy. That's
okay, all right, we'll go with that.
He's fine with it.
So if we're a human living on this planet, this is the only planet we have. It's our home. If we're a parent, we would do anything for our children's sake. If we're a business person, we care about the economy. We care about the community that we live in. We care about our health. We care about the fact that we want to have clean air to breathe. We want to have enough water to drink. We want to have a safe and secure environment in which to live. The single most important thing I feel like I've learned is that we already have all the values we need to care about climate change in our hearts, no matter who we are and what part of the spectrum we come from. We just have to figure out how to connect those values to the issue of climate.
There's already some really interesting work, not definitive, but powerful, showing that the droughts that happened in Syria contributed to the unrest and the Syrian civil war. Well, if you start magnifying that across a lot of states, a lot of nation states that already contain a lot of poor people who are just right at the margins of survival, this becomes a national security issue. And that's why, even as we have members of Congress who scoff at climate change at the same time as they are saluting and wearing flag pins and extolling their patriotism, they're not paying attention to our Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Pentagon, who are saying that this is one of the most significant national security threats that we face over the next 50 years. In China, frankly, part of the reason that people are, that the government there was willing to work with us, their number one priority is political stability. And what they started noticing was the number one Twitter feed in China was the air quality monitor that was put out each morning by the U.S. Embassy. It was the single thing that more Chinese looked at than anything. because people couldn't breathe in Beijing. And smog is not the same as carbon dioxide, but it is generated by the same energy pattern usages. So if that's where people are at right now and they want to make sure their kids are healthy, then let's go after that. If they're interested in conservation as a way to start thinking about climate change, let's go after that. At the end of the day, the one thing I'm absolutely convinced about is everybody cares about their kids, their grandkids, and the kind of world we pass on to them. And if we can speak to them about our responsibilities to the next generation, and we can give people realistic ways to deal with this so that they don't feel like they've got to sacrifice this generation to do it. They have to put hardship on their kids now in order to save their grandkids. Then I tend to be a cautious optimist about our ability to make change.